So here's one small issue I have. That sits there factory, but we'll be using an RX2 radiator, same as mine, which means it's got to be on this side. So I need a way to turn that over there, but I don't have an alloy welder. So I need to make an adapter plate to remove it. So there we go. I think I'll use a couple of gaskets to try and work out how to do this. So just using two gaskets, you can kind of see where I need to be. You got the base one underneath of where it should be, or where it was, and the one on top of kind of where I need to be. The downside is you've got the tensioner over there, and you got that corner right there. So there might need to be a little bit of trimming to get that to fit in there, but I think that'll work. And then we can keep the factory thermostat, because mine used an electric water pump, and I just made all of these. Just made the water pump blanking face and the thermostat face, made them all myself, whereas this is keeping a factory water pump and factory thermostat housing, so I'll just make an adapter and make that work. So I am overlapping two. Right, so by overlapping two gaskets and marking where they were, I end up with this. It's an odd shape, but you know, it does a job and it should seal. It's got to go around the bloody. You got the cam belt coming past this way, and then you've got the tensioner on this way, so you're kind of limited to room, but this is what we end up with. So as you can see, that's that fits on there and clears quite nicely, so the thermostat will still be able to do its job. It just moves it, you know, like basically about almost 180 degrees. So we'll try it on there and see how it goes. Okay, so what we have here is the triggers. Use a crank trigger, which you can kind of just use a crank trigger just, you know, by itself. You can even use an electronic dizzy by itself if you want, but we don't have room for one, so we'll go the same way I did on mine. So I even went as far as setting it up the exact same as mine, so the face of the 6th tooth at middle of top dead center, so it's the exact same as mine. So when we load my map into his ECU, we should be able to get it to fire up straight away. Excuse me. Most of the time these are put on the front for clearances, but I just machined down the back of the spline and slid it over and tacked it up much nicer than the way I did mine. I didn't have a lathe then, so I hacked the shit out of the back of this and just welded it on, but that means that can sit like that. Single tooth needed for home signal, which this allows you to run things like direct spark and sequential injection. You only need one tooth. I had a trigger wheel on mine, same as this, 36 - 1, but it ends up that you only need one tooth, so I end up cutting them all off. I didn't want to do that this time, so I just made one tooth for this one. So that sits on the front face, and then what that allows that to do is be offset, so that I can mount one bracket down here to run a sensor for that one and a sensor for this one off the one bracket, and then they will just be able to pick up. And then as long as that's going to sit exactly where mine sits, and then I'll just clock that so it does sit in the exact same spot. But that's it. Crank trigger, home signal. I'm just going to do a little bit more while I've got the motivation and feeling pretty good. So you will see in other videos, in this video, that I have modified a few things here, and now we'll try and get them on and get them in place. Cool. One thing with thermostats, this thermostat came out of the car. It's still in good condition. I just tested it. I like to drill a 3mm hole in them. It just helps with a bleed process. You know, like a lot of new cars will have a little doggle that goes up and down, you know, and it just helps bleed things, so you're not waiting for things to get fully up to temperature. You can bleed coolant systems a lot quicker and a lot easier. So I think we'll start with the auxiliary pulley. You know, it's got its one little tab there now, so we will have a home signal. Right, so that doesn't hit anything. That's all good to go. Next will be the cam. And then loosely we'll put on the tensioner. Okay, so now I just got to find top dead center on a compression stroke, set the timing, dial in the cam, put the cam belt on. Right, so when I'm setting the timing, I like to try and get that as close as possible. I like to try and get the backing plate centered inside the pulley as much as possible, because that tends to move backwards and forwards quite a bit. You might have to like turn it a little bit just to get a belt on and then turn it back, but try and keep that as close to that as possible. I've set this one up so it's right in the bang smack in the middle of the timing marks, the same as mine. So I just turn it over because this is obviously 2 turns to 1 turn. So the crank turns twice to every one of the cam. So if you put your finger inside spark plug number 1 and turn that, you'll feel it sucking on your finger, and then you'll feel the air trying to push past your finger. You want it so the air is pushing past your finger and the timer marks are bang smack on, and then remove the pulley, put the belt on, set the temperature. Right, so that's the belt on. You know, you've got to put it around the bottom, pull it nice and tight on the auxiliary pulley, and then around the cam. And like I say, sometimes you've got to rock the cam a little bit and just until the teeth fall in, and then wind it so that that's nice and tight, but that still lines up. And then I just check. I check that's where I want it to be. I made a note on mine that the home signal was 45 mil up from the second tooth after the gap. So that's perfect. Nice and tight around there. Nice and tight around the cam. Pretty good. So then I'll just release it. So slip that back off. Make sure it's nice and seated on the crank. Which it is. Nice and seated on the auxiliary. Which it is. Nicely seated on cam, and then release the tensioner. Then I like to get just a little bit of tension on the tensioner, not too much. Tighten it up. Put the washer on. Crank on. And then turn it over a couple of times before I tighten everything. And there you go, everything's still spot on where it needs to be, so now we can just tighten up all those bolts. And that's the cam belt done. It's looking very nice actually. I'm glad we went with these colours. Next we'll do the homemade thermostat relocation. And then last for today, water pump pulley. Sorry, last thing, fuel rail. So yeah, you know, in the last 24 hours, this thing's come a long way. It's starting to look like an awesome motor. Any questions? Let me know. Thanks for watching.